In today's video, I'm going to share with you why it's typically a bad idea to get a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. Hey everybody, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and I'm here to teach you how to get the most out of life with your money. So why would you choose a 15-year mortgage when instead you could spread those payments out over 30 years with a 30-year mortgage? Well, the answer is simple. It's going to save you money and interest. The reality though, is it doesn't save you as much in interest as you otherwise might think. That's what we're going to explore today, is how much interest are you actually saving with a 15 versus a 30-year mortgage, and how can you know which of these options is best for you? So let's start with an example to illustrate this. I'm going to use the example of what if I'm going to purchase a home, and I have two options. I know that I need a $500,000 mortgage, and I can either get a 30-year mortgage paying 7.25% interest, or I can get a 15-year mortgage paying 6.5% interest. Now, if you're watching and you're saying, James, those interest rates are way off, they're higher or they're lower, well, by the time you're watching this, they'll probably be one of the two. The difference though, or the reality is it doesn't matter so much the actual rates, what really matters is the spread between the two. So bear with me through this example, and then we'll talk about how can you apply whatever market interest rates are to the decision so you can see what works best. Now, here's the thing. If I'm comparing that 30-year mortgage at 7.25%, and I'm comparing that to a 15-year mortgage at 6.5% interest, here's the lifetime interest I would have paid on both. On the 30-year mortgage, I would have paid a total of $727,918 in interest. That's a lot of interest to pay on a $500,000 mortgage. Now, if I compare that to the 15-year mortgage, on the 15-year mortgage, I only paid $283,996 of interest. So if you compare the two right off the bat, it's like, well, of course I would do the 15-year mortgage. It saves me about $444,000 in lifetime interest. But that doesn't paint the entire picture. So I'm going to paint the entire picture for you. Before I do so, real quick, a reminder, subscribe right now if you haven't done so already. Make sure that you're never missing one of these episodes as we deliver more content just like this. But now to the example. As we're looking at this, here's why that's an inaccurate picture. To assume that a 15-year mortgage saves you $444,000 of interest. To start, we have to understand the differences between the payments. If I look at the payment on a 30-year mortgage at the $500,000 balance, the principal and interest payment would be $3,411. Well, if I compare that to the 15-year mortgage, the principal and interest payment is $4,356, which is a difference of $945 per month. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that one of the reasons you saved so much interest on the 15-year mortgage didn't just come down to the interest rate difference, it came down to the fact that you're paying it off a lot quicker. You're applying much more money to that principal, so it's you saving yourself interest, not actually the interest rate saving you interest to the full extent, it seems at least. So here's what we really need to do. We need to take that $945, the difference between the 30-year payment and the 15-year payment, and we need to add that on to the 30-year payment. If we want to compare apples to apples here, we need to understand if you're paying the same amount towards each mortgage, what interest rate savings do you have then? Well, if we do that, now the total interest that you saved. So if you apply that extra $945 to your 30-year payment of $3,411, now what you see is you've paid a total of $355,170 in interest. Still a lot, but a lot less than the $727,918 that we originally thought we were paying. So you can see that right off the bat, the difference between 30-year total interest and 15-year total interest, it's really starting to be compressed when we apply the same payment to both the 30-year and the 15-year mortgage. And when it's all said and done, the 15-year mortgage, we see it doesn't actually save us $444,000 in interest, it saves us $71,000 in interest, which granted is still a lot of money. But what we have to consider is what was the opportunity cost over those 15 years? What else could we have been doing with our money? And could we have gained that? Now we'll talk about that in just a second, but right off the bat, we see a narrowing in the amount of interest saved from a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. Now, one quick principle that can be applied whether interest rates are 3%, 7%, or 15%, the wider the spread between the 15-year and the 30-year, the more it actually makes sense to go the 15-year route. The more narrow the spread, the more it makes sense to go the 30-year route. If we rewind, for example, back to 2021, you might have seen 15-year mortgages going for, say, 3%, and 30-year mortgages going for about 3.25%. It's a very narrow margin, to the extent that you are saving very, very little to elect a 15-year mortgage versus a 30. In those examples, the amount of interest saved with a 15-year mortgage is even less. Now, if interest rates in the future are far different, for example, maybe you get a 15-year mortgage at 6% and a 30-year mortgage costs 10%, that's a really wide spread. So the wider that spread, the more it's going to make sense to go for the lower interest rate. But the narrower the spread, the less it's really going to make a difference if you apply the same payment to both. Now, here's what this math isn't taking into account. It's not taking into account the psychological factor. Let's assume you're listening and you're 50 years old and you're saying, James, this makes sense, but I want to retire at 65. And I just don't want, under any circumstances, to still have a mortgage payment by the time that I retire. Well, in that case, there's a strong case, even for psychological reasons, to get that 15-year mortgage. You know that as long as you're making those payments, you're going to be debt-free or mortgage-free by the time that you're 65. So if that's the case, if you're going for it because of the psychological reasons, wonderful. It absolutely makes sense sometimes. Just understand you are pigeonholing yourself into a higher payment, which doesn't give you the flexibility if there's a cash flow issue, if you lose a job, if there's another major expense. The nice thing is with a 30-year mortgage, you have flexibility. If you need to temporarily back off your payments down to the minimum, that's gonna be a lot lower than backing off your payments to the minimum with a 15-year mortgage. So at the end of the day, what are the benefits of a 15-year mortgage? Well, for one, the most obvious is it's going to be a lower interest rate. If it wasn't, you wouldn't get a 15-year over a 30-year. Number two, shorter payoff. Again, this goes without saying, but you're gonna pay off a 15-year mortgage faster than you're gonna pay off a 30-year mortgage. So for planning purposes and trying to understand when am I going to be debt-free, sometimes it's nice to know that there's that shorter payoff until you own your home free and clear. And then number three, kind of more of a psychological reason, but it's forced pay down. If you look at this and say, James, it makes sense, I understand this, but I almost need to force myself to do good things, or if I need to force myself to do the right thing, a 15-year mortgage can accomplish that. It's not going to save you as much as you think it would compared to a 30-year mortgage, but those forced extra pay downs, it's going to force you to do that. With a 30-year mortgage, you could talk about paying extra and paying it like a 15, but you always have the ability to scale back if you want to. So the 15-year mortgage is that way of forcing yourself to do what you want to do. Now, when we compare that to the benefits of the 30-year mortgage, to me, the biggest benefit is flexibility. We never know what life's going to throw at us. We never know what major expenses or cash flow issues or job loss we're going to run into. So by locking in a lower rate, but paying it like a 15, if we really want to pay it down at a certain time, what it's doing is it's allowing us to pay it off in a much shorter time frame, but if something comes up, we have the ability to scale back. We have the ability to lower those payments even if it's for a short period of time, which maybe doesn't put as much pressure on our cash flow or the other aspects of our financial life. At the end of the day, you want to do or you need to do what works best for you. All I like to show people is understanding what's the true cost or what's the true benefit of a 15-year mortgage over a 30. There are some, but those benefits don't tend to be as exaggerated as most of us believe them to be when you actually do an accurate comparison of the same payment with a 30-year mortgage as you would be making with a 15-year. If you found this video to be helpful and want to ask how does a mortgage fit into my overall financial plan, make sure to check out this playlist here. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.